There's a famous quote that I hear quite often, that when digital transformation is done well, it's like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. But when it's done badly, the only thing you get is a slightly quicker caterpillar.
Before we get going and jump into any topics, it'd be good to know a little bit about your background.
I started my journey with Pfizer Pharmaceutical. Spent 6 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and then, as with all paths in our personal lives, relationships determined the change. I moved to the UK, joined a journey for upstream oil and gas, as it was known back then. I was quite fortunate that I came from quite a technology advanced industry in pharmaceuticals, so I could bring a lot to the table at that time in upstream oil and gas. But I did feel that there was a lot more we could do with technology. I made a decision 18 months ago to join Asset55 and push the digital initiative and transformation from another perspective. And I haven't looked back since, and that's how I ended up speaking with the likes of you, Mark, and Cumulus.
There you go. Our journey to Cumulus, or my journey personally, is quite a bit different. I came from the technical side as well, but I was outside the industry. We came from the more technology side, looking at operations from the owner perspective. We hear a lot is kind of, where do we start, right? There's a lot of digitalization efforts. There's process improvements efforts. There's metrics people have to meet for emissions reduction or whatever they happen to be. But it seems to be kind of slow, not only in energy, oil and gas, but commercial construction, places like this are always kind of identified as being behind. What do you think some of the main barriers are? Why is that? What's hard about this?
Well, there's a number of barriers, I guess, depending on your perspective. Whether you're an owner, your EPC contractor, or on the supply chain. I think the importance is gathering that intelligence from all stakeholders to understand the solutions to the problems. But the main barriers, I would say, that repeat often for me are driving change is hard. And for a lot of leaders in facilities and in the industry, the inertia that they come up against is just too much. And that's due to status quo is accepted. Why change? The strategy that we try to deploy is unclear. And because of its lack of clarity, then we lack commitment. The other one that you and I have discussed in the past is the right technology at the right time.
Yeah,
we have a tendency to, look over the fence. What does the neighbor have? I want one of those. May not be fit for purpose. So it's understanding your business needs, making sure that you have the digital competence in your workforce and your company to adopt technology, and the data foundation. So what is the maturity of your facility or your company to be able to adopt these different technologies?
I agree with you almost 100% on that you're completely spot on. As our background in Cumulus and where we come from, and as we've rolled out into the market, if you will, one of the things we push in kind of a model of systems thinking, systems engineering. What we see a lot is kind of this, just go digital, right? Check the box, hammer looking for a nail, find a technology that you said the guy over the fence or the neighbor's using, and do that, and then claim victory. But it may not be the right thing.
There's a famous quote that I hear quite often, that when digital transformation is done well, it's like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. But when it's done badly, the only thing you get is a slightly quicker caterpillar. and that's so true. You can adopt a technology, but we cannot neglect the human-centric part of digital transformation. People are critical. Leaders are critical to ensure that we have a digital transformation. And that is not simply technology. That is technology in people and process working in harmony to achieve an outcome.
So what about, getting a little bit more detailed on that? As we go and we talk to maybe more brownfield world, what can people do that are in that space where they might have been a 50, 60, 70-year-old facility and they want to improve, but what are the things they should look out for? What are some suggestions in your experience? How do we make that easier for them?
essentially the first step would be to evaluate, what is the digital maturity of your facility. And that's in terms of, legacy technologies, processes. And again, understanding what are your objectives? What are your business needs? How do the discrete processes I have interact, whether that is through human interaction or through data sharing interaction? And for adoption of technology, something that we at asset55 are very passionate about is data foundation. So having that trusted foundation of data will enable you to adopt technology today, but maybe in 10 years' time. And you need to make sure that you have a vision. So what is your vision? You get the commitment from the people on site, you get the commitment of the end user, and you engage with the people. You engage with the process owners. And that's where you will unlock the opportunity.
I see that all the time as well. A central digitalization or technology strategy, made in a corporate office. And then when you get out to the facilities, you get out to the locations, it's not fit for that world a lot of times. As you've rolled out and you've been in the market, what type of mistakes are people making?
Without repeating myself too much, I still believe that the three main mistakes are the lack of a tailored strategy for the desired outcomes, lack of employee engagement, so the people and the process owners, and lack of digital governance. And when I say digital governance, which is the only point I haven't covered, is how do you get that cross-silo communication? I still believe that they are the biggest challenges. And the lack of governance for me is critical, where it's important that we understand digital conflicts with traditional ways of work. But it's imperative and critical that we share experiences, we share information, we share data in a consistent and standard way. And I see, they are some of the fundamental mistakes that we make.
Yeah, that's funny. That's absolutely true as well. I mean, one of the things we see is the adoption of new technology is always perceived as a cost. The way to think about it is the way that work is being done today, even if it's a heavily paper-based process or there's rework or whatever the answers are, any new technology, any new process is perceived to be an added cost. The perception of everything just being an added cost versus knowing kind of how much you'd want to reduce and what levers you can pull to get there and how you want to implement things over what time, then I think we'd see a lot of things adopted a lot faster. Yeah. So why do you think it is? What's so comfortable about paper? What's so great about that? Tell me, Conor.
Again, I think we'll be repeating ourselves there.
I know.
Again, change for me. Again, it changes. It changes hard.
Yeah.
Paper-based systems are so deeply rooted in how we work in a traditional sense, and also it's deeply rooted in governance, procedures, process. A client of ours that I had a workshop last week, and we're going through a very interesting digital journey. The vision is there, the understanding is there. We're ticking off all of the requirements: people, competence, legacy systems, how we need to cross-pollinate, get all of the silos interacting. But then at the end, but we need to print out the work orders and the work packs because it's a requirement for the control of work on site.
Right.
We need a paper-based work order. We need a paper-based permit because our procedures say so. Yeah. This is required for the worker on site. And that's a little bit because the infrastructure on the site doesn't have internet access in the field. So there's no 4G or 5G even. And that's a challenge because then the use of tablets becomes slightly challenging. So remote workers is challenging. But also it's very interesting that the majority of major companies still use paper-based invoicing.
Yeah.
And I read an interesting statistic on this a few months back that some companies spend 3% of their revenue on paper. And that's just paper in its basic form. That doesn't include any, if they have to reprint a document, if they lose something.
Right.
And not including storage charge, space for paper. You have the document digitally stored. Right. That's far cheaper and more effective and secure than a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So for me, for me, it's we have so many legacy technologies that require paper that it takes it's part of the industry 4.0 vision, to create a paperless work process where practical. Not every process will be paperless, but there are significant opportunities in the industry to reduce on paper. And not only cost is to be benefited from here, it's also sustainability. It's nature. There's so many benefits that we can take from reducing our paper consumption. So the short answer, we need to drive change. We need to drive change, and change is hard.
The productivity angle is a big one. I mean, we look at that a lot, and I think it's shocking sometimes when you see how much time is spent managing paper. It's a lot of work, and when you have enormous projects and thousands and thousands, 1,000 people out there working on this stuff, hundreds of people, that adds up pretty quickly. I think there's the sustainability angle is 100% correct. The storage and data accuracy is 100% correct. And then productivity is obviously, going back to my comment about things perceived to be free. I mean, it's very low hanging fruit to get rid of paper and and start to digitize a lot of this work. So let's dig in deeper there then. What as we kind of highlighted the digital challenges, barriers, kind of jokingly talked about getting rid of paper. What types of work do you look at that are, optimized or good opportunities for, digitalization or process improvement or just technology? What do you see out there?
Yeah, it's quite funny. I would rank them in the order where my career has went, because I started in very much an operational world where I was very much in the operations side, and then I didn't fully understand why things were constructed, designed in a certain way. So I moved into the commissioning space where I was commissioning systems, and I had a bit more understanding and influence of how we can design based on feedback from my experience in operations. But then I was questioning, why are we constructing in that way? Why is it taking so long?
Right.
And I kept moving back in my career through the different gates of a facility. And now I'm very much focused on data foundation. That's where we need to start, actually,
like that,
with technology. And we're not doing enough in that space. There's a lot of good conversation. There's a lot of strong thought leadership of what we should do. But that's an area where we could really leverage technology a lot. As you said, on major projects, you can have thousands of data points and millions of attributes against tags. And these need to be addressed throughout a project, throughout a facility, as we said, to be able to adopt technology, to be able to create automation, you need trusted data. So that would be one of the first places I would look. Also, planning and work preparation. Planning is traditionally what I would say artistic. It's how does it feel? How does it look? We can move activities around in a schedule. That should be data driven. So if you have data foundation, you drive a schedule with data. Data doesn't lie. It tells you where you are, what you should work, what you have worked, what you haven't worked. That gives transparency, trust, assurance. And that's for project and for operations, in a maintenance environment, operations environment. Manual work, that's an area where productivity and reporting, safety critical work, and then reporting insights, KPIs. All of this is possible when you start with your data foundation and you work your way through. So they are the main categories for me, quite broadly. That I would focus on. Smart tools as well on site, for safety critical tasks, that human error can be eliminated through technology and smart tooling. Why would we expose an asset or people to risk, to safety, to quality, when there's technology available that removes that human factor, that questionable, what value, for example, should I torque a flange? Is this sling strong enough to lift this piece of equipment?
Right.
There's technology available today that will tell you this is good, this is bad, your values are good, your values are bad.
Yeah.
And then the operator error is significantly reduced. So in manual work and safety critical work and operations and project, that's an area where I feel we haven't fully capitalized on what's possible to secure assurance, safety, and productivity also, which is a byproduct of reducing rework. Do it right the first time.
100%.
You know, and again, that question around costs of such a technology is the counter argument is simple. You know, you do it right first time. How many times do we rework tasks on projects in maintenance?
Right.
The statistics are there.
We always talk about high volume. We say mission critical work, meaning it's got to be done right the first time. If there's a failure in that work task, then there's a big consequence. But I liked what you said, you know, going back to the data structure thing. So rather than thinking of each individual task or each individual work process as its own thing that needs to get done and you know, signed off and approved, we're trying to try and convince or trying to use the language more about data, right? Data is what the outputs are for these technologies, not specific work process completion. So, you know, what we're seeing is there's a migration upstream in the users that are being more successful in these categories of kind of mission critical work and data structure, where if you're doing a construction project or whatever it happens to be on site, you know, with more modular fabrication, there's work being performed somewhere else. You know, maybe you've got pipe spools being made somewhere, even before that, somewhere else. And the more we can think about the data story, the story of this work as these things transition into operation and maintenance, you know, I always like to use the example of a medical record. Right? If I can look back and see the patient history, where they came from, what their labs were last time, maybe their weight and height, and I can see that over time, then you know a lot more about the patient and what their health is. And if we can kind of continually using data that's structured well, tell this story over time, then your outcomes are going to be better. And so the types of work that lean towards that is basically everything you said around, you know, quality centric work and mission critical, as I like to call it. So I like what you said about data structure. That's a hard thing to do, though, right? For these old facilities, they do have a lot of this stuff. They've got some, as we talked about earlier, we've got stuff in drawings, we've got stuff in check sheets, we've got old as-built or that are redlined. How do they take that and how do they build a good data structure around that?
I don't want to sound like a sales guy, and I'm not a very good salesman, but in asset55, that's where we have a very unique service offering with our Validate software. It's quite new to the industry, but we have seen a major success in the last 12 months. And what we do, in very simple terms, Validate takes various sources of data and runs cross-triangulation. It needs a minimum of 3 data points, 3 or more. And we check the compliance to the company requirements, site requirements, project requirements, the consistency across the various sources, and the confidence. So what is the confidence in that data set? So regardless of whether you're on a project coming into operation or through construction, or whether you're an operating asset, we understand the importance of data quality and a trusted data foundation. And it's like you said, it's the evolution of the data linked to a tag. And in a project, you know, the questions need to be asked by operations. What data set am I going to get with this tag? Because these are the attributes I need. And it's about having that vision to understand that you set the requirements for what has passed and operations, facilities and operations. We just need to fix as we go. We need to understand what we have, what we don't have, how we can leverage perhaps AI and machine learning If we don't have a strong engineering database, then we need to look at ways of reading P&IDs and ISOs. There's technology available today to do that and start creating this trusted data register.
Yeah.
But there's no excuse for projects that are happening today.
Right.
And we understand what we need. So let's set the requirements on contract.
Yep.
You know, that we say very prescriptive, this is the data I require for my asset.
Yeah.
And it's a deliverable. You know, it's a deliverable for the project to the asset. This shall be delivered in this form with this quality. And that's 100% what will secure the success of digital transformation and adoption at scale as we move forward.
We work a lot of trying to get information. You know, we focus on the manual work side, right? In the field, everything you mentioned with connected tools and quality focus and safety. And, you know, the hardest part for us is always populating the system, getting in the drawings, getting in the identification, unique tag naming, you know, down to various information, which is already collected. You know, for a turnaround, in a lot of cases, the information exists, right? What do you want to call this weld? What do you want to call this flange? What's the bolt material or lubricant type or whatever they know all this, and it's collected. A lot of times it's written down or it's an Excel spreadsheet. But getting over the hump of saying, okay, give me all that information and I'll create a rich database and a user experience for you out of that. Once that's done and you do it once, you don't have to do it again. And then you're just growing this system. So you do have to, I like what you said, you got to kind of get over the hump. And then that economies of scale of cost of implementations and adoptions will be much less the more you do it.
The strategy piece, Mark, that's where it's critical, you know, because as you and I know, we could have an engagement with one sponsor in a facility or in a company that's looking at one task, one initiative. However, the creation of that data foundation and solving those foundational issues can have such a profound effect on other initiatives, which we are not privy to, and perhaps the sponsor is not aware of either.
Right.
And the analogy I use is facilities and assets that are built poorly with poor data structures and sent into operation because the cost of not starting production or operation is so high that we must start and we accept less quality. It's like trying to build a roof on top of a house without foundations.
Yeah.
You know, what's going to happen? It's going to collapse, or maybe you'll get it to sit on top of the walls, but you will need to do a lot of reinforcement work. So all of that additional effort with reinforcements, we should understand that that's going to come. So let's not spend far more time and expense in operation. Let's solve it at the very beginning. And as I said, we can't do anything for assets that have gone past the project phase. But certainly we can make a difference for facilities that are in construction today and planned for construction in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you got to figure these things are 50-year or longer facilities, right? So taking the time the first time around, especially for a new one, to really get it right, set your data structure right, get your processes digitized, and get your endpoints and your integrations from all the systems you want to use working, then turn the keys. You're going to be much more successful once you start it up if you've taken that time. So I agree with you.
A funny story, like you said, about, you know, different technologies. And I said, looking over the fence, there's a friend of mine that said that one of their companies spent a good few million on robots for inspections offshore. A lot of research, a lot of investment. And then they realized when they got them offshore that they can not get them upstairs. You know? So it's a normally unmanned asset, but you know, now they need a robot in each level if they want to do inspection.
Right.
So it's trivial things like this sometimes, you know, that in our industry we get caught up in the embracing technology and we go too far.
I like that example of the robot not getting up the stairs.
Yeah, it's true.
My thought was a little more broad, less from a specific example, but I think the people that we see embracing technology and getting a lot of value of it, I mean, at a very high level, are those that are sort of at first willing to admit that the status quo can improve. If you're willing to kind of take that step and say, we're not as good as we could be, and here's the areas where we need to be better, or maybe I don't even know the areas where we need to be better, but I know we need to be better. Even a small incremental implementation, once you've kind of acknowledged that this process isn't as good as it should be, even small incremental adoption can be a tremendous value. And then you learn the willingness to accept failure as a success. This has been a pretty good conversation. Is there any other kind of last thoughts or anything else you want to?
Just to your point, Mark, from my experience on projects, and it can be perceived as a strength or a weakness, but I've always been quite decisive.
Yeah.
And that comes from a mentor I had for many years in the project world, where he said the biggest cost to projects is indecision.
Yeah.
Waiting
Like that.
to make a decision.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest cost. So he said, when you are in a situation where you cannot say with a high level of certainty what's the right decision or not, take a calculated approach. Discuss with your trusted stakeholders and just make a decision. Because if there's indecision, that is the biggest cost to a project, to a facility. And just to touch on that, it's something I've always taken with me, and it's like you said, it's okay to fail, because if you go forward and it's the wrong direction, at least you know and you can change direction.
Right.
If you stand still, nothing's going to improve. Push the boundaries of what's possible within process, within facilities to optimize what we're doing today.
Well, I think it's been a great conversation, Conor. I think, we're both very much, it's great to be working together and having these, like you said, sharing information, finding places where, we as our companies align, but also our kind of vision for the world aligns. So appreciate your time. And I guess we'll just keep the conversation going. Maybe do another one of these.
Yeah, sounds good.